Okay, so we are going to go over today's warm-up. Again, this is Monday's warm-up. So it says, which situation results in a final value of 0? A says the temperature after a decrease of 5 degrees Fahrenheit from a temperature of negative 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So the word decrease typically means negative. So that would be negative 5. And then from here, it would be another negative 5. Or adding a negative 5. So that ends up being negative 10. So it can't be A. B says the height of an airplane after taking off from ground level and rising 1,000 feet. So ground level would be considered 0. Rising 1,000 feet would be considered positive 1,000. But 0 plus 1,000 is 1,000. So it can't be B either. C says the amount of money received in change after making a $10 purchase with a $20 bill. So if you pay with a 20 and you buy something for 10, 20 minus 10 is 10. So C doesn't work either. And letter D says the distance above sea level after increasing 24 meters from a depth of 24 meters below sea level. So increasing is positive 24, and then this is coming from a depth of 24 meters below sea level, so this would be a negative 24. And as you should know at this point, negative 24 plus 24 is equal to 0. We call this a 0 pair. Okay, very common questions. You've seen this already, but just to reiterate, you must know what a 0 pair is. Look for keywords in these word problems. All right, let's move on to the lesson. So we're going to start with multiplying integers, lesson 1.4. You should have this paper in front of you, ready to take notes along with the video. When I say to pause, make sure you pause and actually try some on your own. And you should not be listening to music while you're listening to me talk. Alright, so lesson 1.4, multiplying integers. So this says review modeling with counters. We didn't actually learn how to model with counters, but I'll show you very quickly now. Pretty simple. So there are positives and negatives. So positive counters, negative counters. So it says represent the following problems with counters, then evaluate. So we'll look at letter A. We have a positive 3, so I'm going to draw 3 positive signs. And then we're adding a negative 4, so I'm going to draw 4 negatives. Now, here you have to know that when you add one positive with one negative, so one positive with one negative, you end up with 0, which we knew from the warm-up. So if it's 0, it cancels out. Here's another 0 pair in this problem, cancels out, and another 0 pair in this problem, cancels out. So you're left with one negative, otherwise known as negative 1. And you can double check that in your calculator if you don't believe me, but it works, negative 1. Let's try letter B. Try a different color here. So letter B says negative 1 plus 5. So I'm going to draw 1 negative and 5 positives. So I have here positive and a negative end up being a 0 pair, and I'm left with 4 positives, otherwise known as positive 4. Okay, letter C. For letter C, we have to make sure we change it first, because we can't do these problems with counters unless we have addition. But luckily we know how to change subtraction to addition. So we would leave, add, opposite, otherwise known as LAO. And we draw that, 2 positives and 8 negatives. Cross off your 0 pairs and you're left with 6 negatives, otherwise known as negative 6. And letter D should be nice and easy for you if I draw 6 positives and 6 negatives. They will all have a match and end up being 0. Again, 0 pair. Alright, let's get into the lesson. So multiplying integers, it says find the product of negative 3 and negative 4. Again, product means to multiply. So we can write -3 times -4 as literally the same thing, just without the parentheses, which means the opposite of 3, -4, because if you put a negative sign in front of a 3, it becomes the opposite of 3. So if you put a negative sign in front of a problem, still means the same thing, opposite of that problem. So it says use negative counters to model 3 times -4. So we actually, in multiplication is repeated addition, but we say this is 3 groups of -4. So we would draw 1, 2, 3, 4. That's one group of -4. 2, 3, 4. 2 groups of -4. And 3 groups of -4. So here we have, if you count it all up, because there's no 0 pairs, this ends up being -12. This second part says make the same model using positive counters to find the opposite of 3 times -4. Well, the opposite of -12 is +12. So here we're finding the opposite of that, which is just the same thing. 12 positives. So the product of -3 and -4 is +12. Alright, so it says, what do you notice about the sign of the product of 1 positive and 1 negative? So this was right here. Try a different color. 1 positive, 3, and 1 -4. So we ended up with a negative product. And what do you notice about the sign of the product of 2 negative integers? This is what we ended up here. We have a positive product. So it says rules for multiplying integers, same signs. Again, same signs would be like here, both positive or both negative. You always end up with a positive product, and different signs, you always end up with a negative product. Okay, so ways to remember the rules for multiplying integers. So, again, I taught this last year, and you weren't allowed to use a calculator when I had originally taught it. Now you can. So ways to remember the rule is probably use your calculator. But for those superstars who'd like to remember the rules on your own, that's cool. There's ways to remember. So this is a tic-tac-toe board, but it has a specific way to draw these positives and negatives. So how this would work is if you have like -3 plus, so a negative times a negative ends up being a positive. A positive times a positive is a positive. A negative times a positive would be a negative. And you go in any direction. A positive times a negative would be a negative. So for instance, in number 1 here, we have a negative times a positive. So I'd find one that works. Negative, positive, you end up with a negative. So we know this answer is going to have a negative product. That's just one way. And then here we have same type of thing. You have negative times a negative is a positive, or a positive times a negative is a negative. So just ways to remember. Alright, so I want you to pause the video. I want you to try these practice problems on your own. And then when you are finished, you go ahead and press play, and the answers will be there ready for you to check. And here are the answers. Hopefully you're able to do that. I didn't say if you could use a calculator or not. I'm cool if you use a calculator. If you want to challenge yourself, try not to. Alright, let's move on to division. Okay, so this is the second sheet you got. I apologize for them not being back to back. Alright, so lesson 1.5, dividing integers. So the rule that we just learned from multiplying was that same signs. So like 2 positives or 2 negatives would be positive. And then different signs. So positive, negative would be negative. Okay, So find the product. Why don't you go ahead and try those on your own before you press pause. Try those on your own. When you have them done, press play. Okay, and here are the answers. Alright, so continuing on, lesson dividing integers. So multiplication and division are inverse operations. So another word for that is opposite. I don't know why I'm writing so many exclamation points. Okay, so example. So 3 times 4 ends up being 12. And then 12 divided by 4 is 3. So this here is a fraction. We read it like this. 12 divided by 4. You probably won't see much of the division sign now that you're in 7th grade, especially not in 8th grade. Here or there you may, but you'll see division represented as fractions, so kind of get used to that. Okay, so what we mean by opposite or inverse operations is that, okay, the answer here was 12, and look here, 12 divided by 4 ends up being 3, and 3 is over here. So everything's all connected. Use the same 3 numbers. So this makes the rule for dividing integers the same as the rule for multiplying. So we already learned the rule, works for dividing too. So negative 3 times 4 we learned was negative 12. So negative 12 divided by 4 is going to be negative 3. So why don't you try these? Go ahead and pause the video, try those, and press play when you're ready. Okay, so hopefully you got those answers correct. The ways to remember rules for dividing integers I kind of filled in too. They're the same as multiplication. Again, positive times a negative, or I'm sorry, positive divided by a negative is a negative. You can use this to find out the sign of your quotient always. And here we are going to try and practice those. Again, why don't you try to do those on your own? Again, I'm not going to stop you from using a calculator. If you'd like to, go ahead. If you want to challenge yourself, don't. Up to you. So press pause and press play when you're ready. Okay, so here are the answers. If you have any questions or you're not really sure why you got something right, or I'm sorry, why you got something wrong, or you're just kind of confused about something, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll be more than happy to help you. Other than that, we are, well, once you're done with the video, which is now, you're going to go back to the assignment that was that this video came from. It was lesson 1.5 and 1.6 on your Google Classroom. So go ahead and click on the second link, which is going to be Khan Academy. And it should bring you right to the assignments page where there are a few multiplication and division with integers assignments for you to do. The few assignments that you'll have on Khan Academy, it's just for practice. So it's just for practice, or for you to kind of get used to multiplying and dividing with integers. So for the rest of the remainder of the period, that's what you'll be working on. All right, see ya.